Nathaniel Hummel and Luke Goodish. Welcome back to Suit Up the Podcast. And you two have suited up.
Yes,
Of
got to,
course.
right? You have to. Thank you for having us. This is awesome and a great chance to pop the suits out, you know?
I know. Yeah. Thank you so much, man. Nothing quite like being on the Suit Up podcast.
It's the
So,
best.
Okay, when in my workout earlier today, I was actually going back through and re-listening to our episode on King Solomon's Mines because A, it's just always fun to re-listen to good episodes, but also,
right.
prepping for having you guys on. And I was like, wow, that was just a lot of fun. So I'm glad to have you guys back on the show and specifically to talk Fighting Heart of Man, Volume 1. I'm going to start off by saying Volume 1 is a great lead-in. You guys have the books ready. You are professionals. You are on the ball. Also, just as I wanted to have you guys tell me about the book, but I was listening to your episode on the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast talking about, hey, this is what's coming up. And Nathaniel actually made a comment about when you were on the Stew Up podcast talking King Solomon's Mines. And there was an element there that related to one of your stories. And I was like, I'm so happy because that was one of my favorite stories in the book too. So great. But hey, guys, just introduce yourselves to the audience, remind them who you are, what your voices sound like, and let's talk about your book.
Daniel, my man, go first.
All
You
right.
got this.
I'm Nathaniel Hummel. Um, I've loved men's adventure fiction, pulp, the whole genre of action adventure stuff for as long as I can remember. I mean, I think last time I said it started with, I don't know. I mean, it definitely started with Robin Hood. It started with the Ten Commandments movie. I loved Yul Brynner's character. So sick. I just love like classic adventure stuff. So that's what this book is all about, the Fighting Heart of Man, Volume 1. So Luke and I started the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast in I think it was the last week of July. We dropped our first episode. So coming up on 6 months, which is pretty crazy, but it's been a whirlwind ride.
Super fun. Yeah, this genre is what I love. I come from a clinical mental health counseling background, but I've always found that like the books and movies about adventure heroes kind of do more than a therapy session even does for me sometimes.
Hmm.
The right film, the right book will get me really motivated in life. So I've taken that drive into wanting to write my own stories and to connect with other people like you fine gentlemen about stories and being like, hey, what books are you reading? And I feel like that just overall enriches my life. So that's why I love the community that Nathaniel, you helped build with the Men's Adventure Fiction Discord.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And Terrence, like what you're doing with these interviews and connecting me with authors like the hard case crime books, found through you. So amazing. I just love this stuff. So I'm a big fan of the genre. If you're a fan of the genre, yeah, Fighting Heart of Man is just our 11 stories that each touch on different types of adventure stories we love and get hyped about. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Well, I'll dig into the book here in just a minute, but first, you made a comment about men's health. I remember listening to an R of Manlius podcast episode that they were interviewing clinical psychologist or something like that that basically was proposing that he was using in helping soldiers recover of like PTSD the 12 labors of Hercules as like
Wow. Yeah,
a
yeah.
metaphor slash discussion point. You read this story, I read this story. What does that mean to you? And using
Right.
it to like feedback mechanism off of it. And I've always found that interesting because that's what the power of story can be. And I think
Right.
men's adventure fiction holds such a great touchstone for that. The interview we did with Bob Dice on the Men's Adventure magazines. You have Men's Adventure Quarterly behind you,
Yep.
the
Yep.
Brock Attacks edition.
There it is.
They made an interesting comment that there's an element to which those were popular in the post-Vietnam era. You do
Mm,
have a lot of soldiers coming back home, and even post-World War II era, where they still like who knows to what degree writing those types of stories and reading those types of stories helped some kind of catharsis as they were returning home.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point because I mean, on the page, it's entertainment at its forefront, but what's going on in the back burner of your brain is like it's that catharsis, like you're talking about. It's having those conversations that you might not be ready to have, and to your point about the 12 labors of Hercules and that guy using that, there's a whole section of counseling called narrative therapy,
Hmm.
and you know you can look into that. There's several ways it's been used narrative, but to that point, I always like looking at what are people's favorite movies? What are their favorite books?
Hmm.
What are their favorite characters? And there might be reasons. And if you dig into that, even on your own, you don't need to be with a counselor, just do this on your own. Think about the characters you love, what resonates with you about that, and thinking, how can I, strive towards that? This is what me and Nathaniel talk about on the podcast a lot is like your life and the heroes you admire, they don't have to be so different. You can get as
Hmm.
close as possible to living that life. And that's what's exciting to me. It's giving people the hope to like, dude, work out, learn how to manipulate a weapon, push yourself mentally so that you are the person that people go to when things are falling apart because you're calm. These things can be trained, these things can be learned, and it all can stem from you reading, a Louis L'Amour book and being like, dude, how did he, everyone was freaking out. There was a blizzard. Like, how did he go ahead and take charge of that situation? I wish I was like that. You can be like that. And yeah, I think there's a lot of power in narrative.
I was gonna try and piggyback off it, but you pretty much covered all the bases, dude. But one thing that the talk about Vietnam specifically kind of triggered in my mind is I think too, it's like there's hard things that we go through in our life, and I
Hmm.
think when you have stories like, I mean, the Hunt books are great,
Hmm.
Louis L'Amour, anything from this genre, you can read that. I mean, especially dude in Vietnam where these dudes were fighting children. That's crazy. So
Hmm.
I'm sure that there's this like one side where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a monster for what I've done. But then you
Hmm.
get to read these stories, you read these books that talk about these heroes having to face these incredible circumstances, these terrible challenges and dangers and horrible decisions that they have to make. And they're heroes for coming through that to the other side. And so I'm sure that that probably reframes so many mindsets and like, not that it saved people from PTSD necessarily, but I'm sure that it helped them on the way to, I mean, like Luke said, narrative therapy. If you're able to rewrite things that you've had to do or things that you've had to go through and kind of change your perspective, like, okay, this is like another challenge that the hero has to overcome. It's another fight that I have to get through. And it's like, okay, I'm actually doing the things that I always thought I could do. I just didn't realize it until I reframed my mind.
There's definitely an argument to be made. There, narrative therapy is the reason I wrote my first two books are romance novels, but that's neither here nor there, guys.
Love it.
So, Fighting Heart of Man, how did the project start? Like, you guys have the podcast going, which also 6 months in, I think you guys have been consistent to almost every week, which, as someone who I've been podcasting now for like five, more than 5 years, a good long while.
Wow.
The
That's
amount
awesome.
of time that
Beast.
I've been able to sustain every week is like maybe 3 months at a shot.
Yeah.
So, again, incredible accomplishment. Congratulations, guys. That's awesome.
Thank
It's
you so
also a great
much.
show.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely we have the luck of having two of us, so someone could be like, "You have to do it this week." If it was just me, way less consistent. You know what I mean? But
It's like
yeah,
having a
we're
workout buddy.
right. Yeah, have somebody to keep you accountable, or else the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast led by me would have 3 episodes, and that never again. But we've been doing like the doubles and things like that, and getting some backlog going, just so we don't,
Good
end up
job.
missing if things happen like that.
Yeah. Well, I've got a at time of recording, the due date for my second child is next Thursday, so January 16th. So
Congratulations.
we're on the cusp, man. Pretty crazy stuff. So that was kind of the mindset. It's like, I mean, when we started this, Luke and I were like, yeah, let's do a release every other week. That sounds
Yeah,
pretty reasonable. And then the first episode, people really seemed to enjoy it. We're like, and then we were like, we had too much fun. Let's
right.
just keep doing it every week. So I mean, we talk about it all the time. We usually record on a Friday or Saturday because that's the biggest chunk of free time that I have, and it's
Mhm.
always at the end of the week. It's like this is exactly what I needed to kind of push me into next week, talking about the stuff that we love, talking with a brother, like we were saying, a workout buddy. As iron sharpens iron, we're just pushing each other on.
Mhm.
So it's been really awesome to do.
And your question about like how the project Fighting Heart of Man got started, I'm
Mhm.
hoping and relying on Nathaniel's memory because I genuinely don't know how it started other than just him and I are constantly talking about like the genre and, wanting to do things together. And I cannot tell you how it started other than most likely in a scenario where it was like, dude, it'd be so cool if we like wrote a story together and then just
Yeah.
boom, it happened. Like I can't recall. Is your memory better than mine or is it just I don't remember.
I'm not sure either. I think that
He's
it was
about to
kind of
be a dad for the second time. His memory is already fading.
I'm frazzled beyond belief. Um, I think that I think it really stemmed from, and it just goes back to having someone that you can kind of we have an episode about the one man armies and the lone wolf characters,
Right.
and those are great characters. But on the page, it's much better, or on the screen, it's much better than in real life. I mean, you need somebody that you can be
Hmm.
accountable to. You need someone who can hold you up to challenges. And I think that Luke writing his Noah Redford book, one of the two that he's got coming, on a every other week he was releasing a new chapter. That really lit a fire under me for sure. So with that in mind, I just started churning out short stories left and right. I would send them to Luke, and he'd be like, "Dude, these are so much fun." And I'd be like, "Yeah, and Noah Redford's so fun, and the short stories you're posting on your website are so fun." And it was like, I don't know if I suggested it or Luke suggested it, or we both kind
You're
of just
smarter
had
than me, so you probably said it. You did.
no, no, I doubt it. But we were like, this is the pulp stuff, man. Like, we should just
Hmm.
put something together, two different authors, so we'll double our reach of people we know, first of all. I mean, so
Hmm.
many of your sales are just like friends being like, oh, you wrote
Yeah.
something?
Right.
I'll check that out. And then we both have pretty big Instagram followings. So it was like, all right, let's do it. Well, and to be on the page with LS Goodish, dude, unreal. So cool. So, and I mean, I couldn't have done this without Luke. Luke's mind for publishing is out of this world. I mean, everything you see in this book, all the interior design and pages, and like you pointed out, the really good job of getting the podcast and the information out in the first few pages, all his stuff.
Hmm.
He's just that marketing brain of his, unreal, dude.
I appreciate it. You're too kind to me. But the best part of the book is definitely Change of Heart, one of Nathaniel's stories. So the real reason you buy that book is for Change of Heart in the thing,
Okay,
not my interior design.
you say that change of heart. I wrote down my two favorite stories. Change of heart is definitely it.
Dude,
Is
it's the one.
no offense, Luke. I picked one of your
Oh,
stories that I
never,
love
never,
too,
never.
but when we get to like French Foreign Legion, I'm like,
Yeah,
and
dude.
I'm here for this.
Dude, I 100%. You
Don't
could
you
put
describe
every story
swords
I've ever
coming
written.
out?
Dude, I
Yeah,
love that story. It's my favorite thing Nathaniel's ever written. It's so good. It's a masterpiece, straight up. I love it.
thanks, guys. Yeah, I mean, I was just talking with my brother-in-law about this today because somehow he hasn't seen the movie Secondhand Lions, and he didn't even know
What?
who Robert Duvall was. He was like, "I know
Get
the
with it,
name
sir.
sounds familiar," and I was like, "He's the guy, isn't he
Godfather.
Tom? Tom from The Godfather is his name, right? Is
Yeah,
it
Tom
Tom?"
Hagen. Tom
Yeah,
Hagen.
I was like, "Come on." But that movie was so influential to my
Hmm.
childhood. I remember my parents showed it to me very young, and for the next like probably every twice a week we would watch the French Foreign Legion flashback scenes with young
Hmm.
Hub and Garth, and it was just I was so locked in. I loved it so much. So this story was written kind of out of that passion and out of that idea of like, why did we never get more movies like that? Like, dude, sword
Hmm.
fighting. It's a time when there was actual like real modern firearms, but also it was just like the dudes were all badass enough that they would just sword fight too. So it's like this is perfect. Like, I gotta sit in this time period and write some stuff. So I do know for sure that Jock will come back eventually.
Yes.
Dude, he's got to. I told Nathaniel I want to extract that story and put it in its own like micro paperback type thing, kind of like
Oh, like
with what Charles
Stormgate Press?
Millhouse. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. I have
Because
loved those.
those are amazing, right? The Zane
Brilliant.
Carrington, so
Hmm.
sick looking.
I love Zane
Feels great.
Carrington.
He's my favorite one. Yeah, yeah, he's so sick. But I want one of those for that story to be the bedtime story for my son every night because like it is the most pinnacle, perfect men's adventure fiction story in my mind. It has like everything, the beauty to save, like the adventure to live, the battle to fight, everything's in there, and it's got like the machine guns on top of roofs. It's got sword fighting. It's got castles. It's so sick that my son needs to grow up on that story alone. That's his Rambo, you know?
Thanks, man.
Of course. Of
I
course.
don't
Thank
deserve
you for giving it to my son.
this.
To that end, just as a comment, Luke, my favorite story of yours was The Stranger and the Fire.
Oh,
I
nice.
know
Nice.
that I know that it's a not a huge story in terms
Mhm.
of like breadth, but it's so unique
Thank
and
you.
I enjoy I'm usually the guy that skips through atmosphere when I'm reading
Hmm.
something. I'm like, get me to the
Yeah,
dialogue, get me
yeah.
to the action. What's
Same
all
way.
this extra stuff? But I loved every just building out what the scene looked like was so well crafted and it built the tension
Yeah.
so incredibly for that short
Thank you.
story. How did that one come about for you?
So I talked about it with Nathaniel once that my dad used to talk about Blackbeard the pirate and how he used to love this book about Blackbeard because it talked about him as a strategist and a mental warfare kind of proponent. And he
Hmm.
would put the wicks in his beard and light it on fire because at that time superstitions were huge. You could really convince someone I'm a ghost. And so that always stuck with me. And you know I love Westerns. I've already pulled out a Louis L'Amour book. It might not be the last time. But I love Westerns, so I wanted to kind of make this bounty hunter who
Hmm.
plays mind games, who plays on people's fears and kind of like is using mental warfare as his tactic. And so he's this much older guy and not to spoil the story or anything, but you go through it and you kind of see from the criminal's perspective, like the labyrinth that this dude's creating, because it's all show, it's all smoke and mirrors, it's all him like messing with this guy. And I thought that is an interesting concept that I wanted to see play out. So that's where that came from for me.
I want to ask both of you guys a little bit more about your short story writing. Like, I've always found that it's the genre, the form that I struggle with most. When we interviewed Stephen Hartov, he had recently published a three short story collection, and just that a short story, you can write a lot of novels and still find short stories difficult.
Yeah.
I was curious, what was your guys's first thing when you started coming to the short story? What are some lessons, tricks you've learned? What's your level of comfortability with it? And what do you think makes a good short story work? That's a lot of questions I packed into like one
Right.
sentence
No, I
that
like
would be
it.
mercilessly edited.
Nathaniel, I think you have a better grasp, and I'm not just trying to like be nice to my friend. I think you have a better grasp on short stories. So you should answer first and then I'll get back to it. Because without you, I probably wouldn't write nearly as many short stories. Beforehand, I probably wrote like two, three in my life. But you really kind of made me fall more in love with short stories and so I'll let you take this one away.
Okay. Well, I gotta say, I feel like this is just gonna be a basic like copy and paste of what Luke said. I feel like Luke is really, really good at short stories because um I have a hard time keeping them short, which Luke and I like go back and forth. He's like, you're always writing longer short stories. And I'm like, I think that's a bad thing. I think that the fact that you can condense a story so well and tell a full story in less words, like that's the point of a short story to some
Hmm.
degree. But to to go into kind of the method for my madness, I mean, it all started after reading the pulp pipe and poetry article, The Pulp Work Ethic. And I literally, up until that point, I'd always been like, yeah, dude, I'm gonna write a book. I literally have a note in my phone. It's like write a book, make millions of dollars. And that's it. That's like
That's all the
it's
note is,
probably from
baby.
like
That's
20
all you need.
that's all you need, 2016. And so I remember right after I got married, I was like telling my wife like because I it was right during COVID. I was still trying to find a job because everything was shut down. So I was like, I'm
Hmm.
gonna go spend like I'm gonna try and actually like view this writing as a job. Like I'm gonna
Hmm.
go up there, I'll spend 2, 3 hours just writing focus. And my wife would always come up there and I'd be asleep because I just couldn't do it. I couldn't lock in.
Locked in.
Yeah, I'm gonna go write for 2 or 3 hours. She comes up and I'm like, the dog's cuddling on me. I'm sound asleep. Great, great writing career. And so 2023, October 2023, I read this pulp work ethic. I'm like, dude, I've written a ton of stuff. Every single time I get probably like 10,000 words in,
Hmm.
totally out of ideas. I'm like, all right, on to the next thing. So I have a bunch of great starts, no finishes. So I literally sat there and I wrote an 1,800 word short story in like 2 or 3 hours. And it was the first thing in my whole entire life I'd ever written fully, ever completed in a single go. And it is in this book. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, so that was really kind of where I locked in. And then as I continued writing more and more, I realized that, and I really think about this a lot because uh, the way that I write is very action heavy.
Hmm.
It's very like focused on action because that's the sort of movies I like to watch. That's the sort of books I like to read, um, almost to its own detriment. And so I remember talking to Luke. I was like, dude, I can, because I just, after that, I just started churning out short stories one after the other. Um, and I really like the 6,000 to like 18,000 word range, which
Hmm.
18,000 is kind of pushing in. Like if you
Hmm.
go by publishing standards,
You're
that's
getting
getting
close to
close.
novella at
Yeah,
that point.
exactly. Which I really like that range because I feel
Hmm.
like the amount of action that I pack in, by the time you get there, it
Yeah.
hasn't gotten tiresome. So it's
Hmm.
able to like keep that pace. And I remember saying to Luke, like, dude, I don't know if I'm actually like I don't think I could ever write a full novel because I don't think my writing style would lend itself to it. And he was like, you probably could. And I ended up writing a 65,000 word novel after that because I
So I
just
was
challenged
right.
myself to do it.
You're
Yeah, it was
welcome.
like,
Awesome.
well, the jury's still out on whether or not it's too much action. I sent it to my brother. He's like, yeah, it could be. There's a lot of action in this, but
Have you read Alistair MacLean yet?
I have. I love Alistair.
Yeah, he's great.
So,
There's actually
like, you could
actually a
do
pretty
it.
big nod in the novel to Alistair MacLean. Um, so, but I'll say less. Luke, take what? How about you? How does a
Nathaniel,
short story?
Nathaniel, now I just want to read it. You have whetted my appetite.
Right?
Well, we'll see. Maybe sometime in 2025, early 2026, something could be cooking.
Awesome. Luke?
Yeah, so for me, I like to think of the short story like as a snapshot, kind of like
Hmm.
you alluded to, where,
Yeah.
and I think it's maybe why mine are so short compared to Nathaniel's, is that I see it as like, what glimpse do I want to showcase?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I might build up the story before and after in my head, but it's
Yeah.
like I can't, I have to force myself not to show any of that. Kind of can touch on that, and it helps you with character development and kind of like growth of the world, but you keep it contained. And so it's kind of like, for some reason, I always picture in my head like the DVD scene selection thing. And I'm just
Uh-huh.
gonna like flip through the story. I'm gonna hit scene
Oh,
select, and I'm gonna pick one of these scenes, and we're gonna just go off that. And I think the most glaring example of that in the short story collection for me is if you read like Noah Redford's The Body. It's
Hmm.
like that one just seems like I hit scene select, and you just like the opening shot was like the body floating past him, and then it's like you're just kind of in the action scene. I mean, there's
yeah.
it's literally just that happens at the beginning. So I don't find it as necessary to give expo. I'm just sure why some people probably don't like my writing. I don't always give exposition going into it, and then I also don't like stay with you too long after it. I just give you like a blip. That's kind of how I see it.
Do you think that writing, so the Noah Redford story that you were publishing on your website was you were literally doing it like a serial. So you
Yeah.
had one, two, three. Do you think that, how do you think that that influenced how you chose to write your short stories at all? Was from
Yeah, I
writing
think
more of
it
serialized format?
I do, because that was always like that. It was like scene selection, click on the next scene. And I wanted intentionally for it to be readable enough as its own thing. Like if you jumped in on 14, could you
Hmm.
have somewhat of a fun, entertaining scene? And then, if you jumped in the first or second, I always wanted it to be like that. And I think that practice of just writing an action piece
Hmm.
helped me get that rhythm and that kind of tone for how I want to write something where it's almost feels like it's taken from a larger story that you didn't get to see and you just plugged it in, you saw this one part. But yeah, that writing it serialized was definitely a growing experience for me in a lot of ways. And that's why that book is not coming out first, because I was like, I gotta fix some things here. There's some glaring plot holes, some different things like that. So it's like, I definitely did not have that perfect yet. You know what I mean? I definitely, there was
Hmm.
some flaws to it, but it was a learning experience and it sharpened me up a bit and it at least made me consistent.
I I was very impressed when you were doing that. The thing that I've always struggled with as a writer is I want to have everything as perfect as I
Hmm.
can. Hitting publish is the hardest thing in the world for me to send anything that is not
Yep.
that I can't. I'm like, but I can work on this longer is
Right.
always my thing. So what I find impressive is that you guys have done that. I mean, that's probably the same thing with the podcast is you guys have done a good job being consistently hitting publish over and over is what builds a body of work. Which to that kind of segueing there, you guys both used what I'll call serial characters for the both of you, Noah Redford and Nate Colt in your stories. What was it? A, where did these characters come from first? And B, what was are there specific adventures you still want to tell about them? How do you like, and obviously we have a Noah Redford book coming out, but Nathaniel, are we going to get a Nate Colt novel?
Yes, that's what the one is. That's what
Yes.
the
There
all
we go,
60
baby.
65,000 words of Nate Colt, uh, his interior monologue the whole time. So buckle in for better or for worse. Um, yeah, I since I'm already talking, I'll just
Hmm.
dive in. Nate Colt was the the combination of James Bond and Nathan Drake and every character that I ever loved growing up because I remember probably the years 2010 or so. Um, I just found out about James Bond and really kind of deep dived
Hmm.
into him. So I made a shoulder holster out of duct tape and I went over to my friend's
Beast.
house. Um, yeah, we're just having a blast and he just downloaded the Uncharted 2 video
Hmm.
game demo and we played that the whole entire night and then probably like 10:30 at night it's snowing outside. We just decide like, all right, grab the guns, boys. We're gonna run around the house because it's too cold to go outside. And we just had this crazy adventure. And that's where the character kind of started. And then years after that, he would always play as my best friend growing up would always play as Bing Callahan. I'd always
Hmm.
play as Nate Colt or some iteration
Hmm.
of him. The name took a while to lock in. And then as I kind of grew up, I realized that there's not really any, and this is why I think I love treasure hunting so much treasure hunting stories is because you
Hmm.
really can't have a character who's just like, I'm an adventurer and that's what I do for a living. So you got to
Yeah.
manufacture some way for them to end up on adventures. And they
Hmm.
can't just be like, all right, I got a detective case to solve. Like you got to get out in the jungle. You got to get out on the cliffs. You got to get out in the mountains, but you also have to be able to go into the city. And so it was kind of just like, if I could have the perfect idealized career, what would it be?
Hmm.
And it would be an international private investigator who takes
Hmm.
jobs from all dimensions, whether it's like, okay, I need you to find this guy who stole my necklace. I'm on it. Or okay, I need you to you found that necklace. Now find one that's 5,000 years old and now you're treasure hunting. So that's really kind of where it came from. It's like, dude, I want a guy who's quick on the draw from a shoulder holster, ready to climb stuff, ready to punch people, ready to flirt with the ladies, but I want it to be like super fun and super approachable. So that's where Nate Cole came from. And then um, I used to write him as third person, and I still have written a few stories of him in third person perspective. But I really found when I first started reading the Stephen Marlowe's Chester
Hmm.
Drum and Richard Prather's Shel Scott that the inner dialogue, the conversations that they have with you as the reader are so
Hmm.
entertaining and they can really take the book from being just like a okay, I'm following a third person and it's really cool because he's such a badass, but now you're like in a personal relationship with him. I mean, I've read 20 books from each of those authors of that character. So I know Shell and Chet very, very well because I've spent that much time with them. So that's kind of the idea. It's like when you get to know Nate Colt, to some degree, you get to know me, but in all reality, you get to know an idealized, much cooler, badass version of me that I wish I could be. So that's kind of the background for Nate Colt.
He's
Perfect.
a really fun character. Again, one of the
Yeah.
things I really enjoyed about seeing both your guys' serial characters in the stories were that I know that they can keep popping up then in subsequent stories. Even I think, Luke, you did comment that Cutlass Kane might come back in future
Oh yeah.
stories too.
Oh
So
yeah.
like that's part of what made the pulps were that
Right.
you had these characters like Conan. You had characters like the Shadow. Again, with
Yeah.
Bob and Bob Dyson built no, it was with Wyatt Doyle. We were talking about the fact that in the men's adventure like magazines, they didn't have serial characters, which means you just kind of had, oh, this story, then this story. You don't have a character you can kind of follow from book to book, from
Yeah.
installment to installment.
Yeah. Yeah, now you
But
got Jock. He's gonna be the
yeah,
one.
and
He's
Jacques.
let's
Okay, even
go.
down to his name is Jacques. And
Right?
the I love when it got to that point where it's like, oh, and he changed it slightly to the some people called him by the French spelling, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that is the that's one of those things that as a reader you see because it's spelled originally Giac or something like that,
Yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I as a reader hear that slight inflection difference, and it
We.
brings a smile to my face. Yes, slight inflection difference.
Yeah.
So it's such a great story, dude. Now you guys are getting me hyped up. I gotta read it after this before bed. It's gonna be my bedtime story to me.
Okay, if I was to describe what would be like my perfect bedtime story, that probably does
Right?
actually get there.
Dude,
Yeah.
You
raiding a
guys are killing
castle?
me.
Let's
Uh,
go.
But
Luke,
let's talk about
yeah,
Noah
talk
Redford because
about
Noah
Noah
Redford
Redford.
so good.
I he's not as good as Jock. Let me say this first. No, I'm kidding.
Dude.
No, so no Redford for me, kind of like what you were saying, Nathaniel. It's like it's who I want to be when I grow up. I wish I was Noah
Hmm.
Redford. You know what I mean? So, and particularly doubling down on everything I've said about the power of narrative and storytelling for men, and their mental health. Like I want him to be a character that young boys can pick, like, 14, 15 pick up and kind of see as
Hmm.
a role model. To me, he's just like embodies everything that I think like a masculine, godly dude should be.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing where you were saying you can't make somebody an adventurer, but I wanted to almost make him like such a good man that he has to step into every situation that comes across his way. Like, and I have to get involved here. And the precipice for getting him involved in every situation is not fortune and glory or anything. It's oh, this, like in the novel coming up, it's, oh, my husband is missing in the Congo. Can you please like help us get there and get my son his father back? And he's like, let's do it. Let's go. And then he gets there and the adventure ensues. Or like in the body where it's like,
Yeah.
hey, this guy deserves like a proper burial. I don't know anything about him, but why is this guy's body like that? And then, yeah, so for me, Noah Redford, he came from Spencer Dutton, Indiana Jones, um, Punisher, just all the characters I've loved. Same thing, an amalgamation of just wish fulfillment. Like, what
Hmm.
stories do I want to read? What stories would I want to give to a young boy? What story would I have wanted to read as a kid that would let me go like, dude, I need to button myself up. I need to dress nice. I need to stop swearing so much. I need to like get my life in order. So he's that. He doesn't swear. He doesn't smoke. I don't try to make him, Steve Rogers, where it's like he's too clean. I like him to
Hmm.
be rougher edge. I want him to be,
Hmm.
you
I
think
really
of
enjoyed the story, the buddy story he did
with
with Sal.
Sal. Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorites because that dynamic between a character that is there for the right reasons and one that's like, I just want to keep going. They can have her
Yeah.
is my favorite dynamic potential for a story.
Thank you. And yeah, hopefully these guys will meet up again and have some more adventures together because
Yeah.
we already alluded to they had a history and hopefully they'll have a future together because so yeah, I agree with you. When you have somebody who's kind of locked in one mentality of this is right, and you got like another guy who's willing to see kind of truly not Noah's not even always in the right in the stories when you look at it. It's like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
morally correct, but like, dude, you're being ridiculous.
Yes.
You're not a flexible thinker at all. Stop being like this. And so I find that stuff fun to play with.
Noah Noah makes me think of Henty Hemingway to a certain degree, which I really like.
Yeah.
It
Thank
hits
you.
the right button. So hats off, Fedora or Stetson to both your characters because again, it's the characters that are fun to follow in a story. I remember reading a book about detective fiction, and the point was, yes, an interesting mystery is what you really want. But like one of my favorite mysteries recently was Stardust Trail by J.R. Sanders. And it's about a detective who solves a mystery on a Western film set. The
Oh,
mystery
sick.
itself is not amazing. Like, I highly recommend the book, but what makes it fun is Nate Ross, the detective.
Yeah.
And you want to be there, especially when you're in their head. To your point,
Yeah.
Nathaniel,
Right, right.
you want to enjoy it. I struggle to read Spillane. I want to enjoy
Hmm.
Spillane. Mike Hammer is too dark, too gritty, too in your face. I'm more of a Shel Scott type guy, is the thing that I
There
have
you go.
learned.
Yeah, I agree. Mike Hammer, you kind of want to like wash your hands after you read a Mike Hammer book because it's just like I don't even understand what it is because there's some of the things that he does that I'm like, I would probably do the same thing, but for some reason the way he's doing it is just not right.
His
I
word
don't,
choices sometimes the way he'll describe things is gross. Like you said, it makes you want to like wash your
yeah,
hands.
Hmm.
like I'm getting a little uncomfortable just reading them.
Is he okay? Wait, is he also the same guy who writes the like they made Payback, the Parker series? Who writes those?
Oh, those are completely different author,
Yeah.
Donald Westlake. No,
Yes.
Westlake is amazing.
Yeah, he's really
Those books though, the first one, dude,
Hmm.
have you read like the first one that Payback was based off of?
No, I want to though because Payback is
Love
genuinely
Payback.
one of my favorites. Guys, future podcast episode, we
Yeah,
need to do
Payback,
Payback
Mel Gibson, let's
because
go.
I Maverick is my favorite Mel Gibson movie of all time. I will
oh, good
never,
choice.
Oh, that's awesome.
never can't nothing can compare. But Payback is so much
Dude, it's so good.
fun.
But that, yeah, same thing like that. To your point, he does it way better. That's the dark that
Hmm.
I want to read, but same
Hmm.
type of thing where you'll see stuff in that book that's like, this is like shocking. And that's where I used to write kind of more in that genre where it's like, this is disturbing. And I don't
Yeah.
want to keep falling into that. So taking it into a lighter, more fun approach for sure.
Well, that's if you guys haven't read, he also wrote the Dortmunder series, which is
Yes.
basically a rip-off of
He
the
rip off his own
Parker
books.
series, which is crazy. So if you to that point, Luke, if the Parker series is like, because I agree, I remember reading one of the Parker books. I was like, I don't know if I can because there's a lot of Parker books. So I was like excited to have a long series to follow, and I was like, all right, this might be like a sprinkle these in every once in a while because they do have some punch to them. But then I read the Dortmunder books. I'm like, what the hell is this? This is crazy because it's
That's funny.
literally just spoofs of his own heist stories,
That's
which is
so
so
funny.
funny.
There's one of the Parker books, I think it was on Audibles Plus, which is why I read it, but basically it's Guy convinces Parker to get him in on a heist. No, it's a Dortmunder book that
Oh
the
yes,
guy
dude,
shows
this
up
one's
and
so
says,
good.
this is what they did in this Parker book. We
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
that and make money. And basically it's Westlake going, this is what would happen if this happened for real. And it
That's so
is
funny.
So funny.
the meta nature. I'm like, Westlake recycled his plot,
Dude,
changed five things, and he made money
ahead of his time with the
There's
meta.
ahead of his
also
time.
that book is hilarious because I read that book. I remember reading that. And I was like, now you can't be telling me he's like his inspiration is his own book. Dude, this is incredible. I don't understand how you can get away with this, but he did, and it is it's hilarious.
I love it.
So
Then
getting to go ahead, Luke.
no, you're good. I was just saying this is why this genre is so fun. You never get stuff like this in other genres. It's amazing.
I One of the things I think you guys have done a great job of doing and highlighting in Fighting Heart of Man is that men's adventure fiction has such a wide genre pull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, there is a little piece of everything and many different little variations. I mean, we have the boxing stories, westerns, adventures, detective. Like, there's just a lot that you can pack in it. And I think you guys did a great job of varying the type of story, the length of story, and the characters of the story.
Thank you.
Starlight Pulp guys, when I interviewed Brian Townsley, he said that when they pick the review, and they come up with those
Hmm.
stories. Organizing and picking the stories to fit together feels like trying to organize a music album.
Right.
And I
Mhm.
think that that's something you guys did a good job of fighting Heart of Man is staggering the types of stories and the lengths of the stories.
Thank you.
With the end
Yeah.
kind of being the hit on the keys.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And like you said, to your point of the scope, we didn't even brush the surface, really. I mean, there's sword
Hmm.
and sorcery, there's sci-fi. I mean, every genre, that's the secret. It's almost like that Hulk thing where he's like, I'm always angry. It's like everything's men's adventure fiction. Like there is no real way to define this. Everything is men's adventure fiction. It's all about
I mean,
branding or marketing, honestly.
it really is. I was actually about to make a joke, an all-female cast is not men's adventure fiction, but I was thinking about Brad Thor's Athena project, and you
Right.
have a group of like five beautiful, skilled female assassins. I don't
Lioness on
know.
TV right now?
I don't know
Yeah.
what sounds more like men's adventure fiction than that, quite honestly.
Right.
That almost sounds like it could be more men's adventure fiction than just a male cast to some degree. Uh, yeah, well, and that's what's so cool too about the genre because I think that I remember Luke said he was at BoucherCon and he was talking with
Hmm.
somebody like men's adventure fiction. That seems like sexist. And he's like, I didn't name the genre. Like
I did not.
it's a thing. And I think that if you look at characters, female characters in men's adventure fiction, I
Hmm.
think some of my all-time favorites were written by Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Hmm.
Um, Deja Thoris and the John Carter stories, absolute badass. Like she, and there's even one where I think Thuvia is his daughter-in-law, John Carter's daughter-in-law. She's a badass too. There's literally a book called Thuvia, Maid of Mars, and it's about her going to find John Carter's son because he was kidnapped, I think. Don't quote me on that. But then Jane from the Tarzan books, I mean, Jane's cool in the movies that she's in,
Hmm.
but in the Tarzan books, dude, she's like tough as nails. She's ready to rock and roll and fight. So I think that it's funny that like I said, I personally think that some of the greatest characters, female characters of all time, are found in the pages of books like this. I mean, Marion Ravenwood, great,
Hmm.
Yeah.
great character. I can't Evie from The Mummy, one of
Yes.
Yes,
the
Oh
dude. She's
my
my
best.
favorite.
goodness.
She's my
Yeah,
favorite of all time, dude.
they
I
just
love
know
her.
how to. I think that that's what it is. Is like they're writing characters that go
Hmm.
with the men from these stories, and it's like
Hmm.
they've got to be ready to
Tough,
fight. They got yeah,
capable.
exactly, smart.
Hmm.
And if you ever read Rebecca Redford and think, is this a ripoff of Evie? Yes, it is. It
Yeah.
is. She's the best character in the universe. Of course it is.
Yeah, dude. And Rebecca's also a shining example. I know in the serialized one, she's just kicking butt the whole time. I love
I love Evie. That's all I gotta say.
it.
I did The Mummy with Scott Hebert back a year and a half ago or something like that. I'm like, I think The Mummy may have to be one of those ones that's like a constant refresh.
The
I was
Mummy
joking.
Returns.
Oh my goodness. Okay, but The Mummy Returns have a very complicated relationship with.
It's a really good
Really?
movie until Dwayne
Wait,
Johnson comes back.
it's true. So honest question though, Luke,
Mhm.
is Evie as good in The Mummy 3?
Dude, the recast ruins it for me. Ruins it
Okay,
for
that
me
that's what I
immediately. Yeah,
thought.
yeah.
Yes.
I don't like it as much. That made me mad and upset. Very sad. I still love The
Yeah,
Mummy
that's
3.
sad.
I like The Mummy 3.
I think it's
Yeah,
underrated.
not the same. Yeah, it's very good. It's just she's not the same.
The chase scene in The Mummy 3 through, I don't know, was it Shanghai?
Hmm. Something like
Yeah,
Crazy.
that.
super
So
sick.
cool.
We need to. I'm making the note now for October's episodes. So actually, I was joking with the guys from American Pulps. We're just going to do a Brendan Fraser month and just
You
Nice.
totally
pick
could.
the like top Brendan Fraser. I want to do George of the
Dude.
Jungle. Like
Yeah.
just,
Dude, jacked in that movie too, you know? I look at
oh
that
my
physique and I'm
goodness.
like, dude, I gotta get to the gym now.
Well, a sad part is he said like that caused him to like have anxiety and
Oh
issues like
no.
for the future. I'm like, in fairness though, I 100% understand because if I looked like that at any point, I would be
Yeah,
like, how do I not change?
right? How do I move on with this? I have to keep this.
So, getting back to Fighting Heart of Man, one of the other things that I think you did a good job in the story, to a point you guys made earlier, lone wolf characters are fun to read about, but they aren't really practical for daily life. That's not really how people are by and large, and the people that are kind of psychopaths. I
Right.
think you
For
guys did a
sure.
good job of balancing in this book the characters that are lone wolves. There are some genuine ones, but also in a lot of cases the main characters are people that are part of a sense of community. To like the point on Jacques is he's part of the French Foreign Legion. He has the Brotherhood with him, and it's when
Yeah, for
the
sure.
Brotherhood is gone that he has to like step up and start doing more in there. Like
Yeah.
this is you guys did a good job of holding a balance for those two types of characters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's an important thing to us, I think, for sure, the community sense. And that's what we try to, you know, foster with the podcast and the
Hmm.
Discord is because like this is a really lonely generation and a lonely time for people. And I certainly don't like seeing that, and it doesn't have to be that way. And nothing like bonding over books, you know what I mean? Like this is a
Hmm.
shared point that people can really quickly connect with and connect deeply with. Back to the points of like how the power of narrative and how powerful stories can be. You can lock in on a theme. You can lock in on why you like a certain story. And now you and this person aren't just friends, but you're really connecting on a deeper level, and you understand the person on a like a deeper level. That's what is very inspiring to me about the genre outside of its just entertainment factor is what it can do to reinvigorate young men who are living such lonely, depressed
Hmm.
lives right now. We got the,
Yeah.
you know, the deaths of despair rising and things like that. And we do anything to counteract it and don't discount what men's adventure fiction and reading could do for that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Very well said. I think too, it's like if you've got a character by themselves, it can get lonely when you're reading it because I
Hmm.
mean, like it is sick to have stuff like John Wick where he's taken on 45 guys all by himself. You're like, "Dude, this
Mm.
is cool. This is like I aspire to be able to do this." And I think, I mean, we touched on that in the episode that we talked about. Like, you need to be in a community so that because life will put you in places where you're on your own, and these
Hmm.
stories will put you in places where you're on your own. But it's only by like Jock training with the French Foreign Legion for years. I mean, Noah and Sal are kind of a chaotic combo where they play off of each other, but it's like both of those guys get into that situation because of the other one to some degree, but it's only together that they can get through it, and it's only together that they can get through it while keeping like their humanity intact. I mean, specifically Sal, because he's ready to cut and run. No, like, no, dude, you may not want to be a good man, but I'm going to make sure you are a good man. I mean, that's what we need. That's what everybody needs. I'll be the first to admit. I mean, Luke and I talk all the time about working out and stuff like that. And I like to work out first thing in the morning. My brother-in-law was like, dude, you're crazy for doing that. And it's because I know that at any opportunity to take an excuse to not work out, I'll do it. So I got to get
Hmm.
it out of the way with first thing because otherwise I'm going to get home late from work and be like, too late, can't work out now. So I gotta do it first. And that's what it is. It's like, if I don't have someone in my life being like, dude, did you work out today? Dude, how many words did you write today? Like, it's so easy
Hmm.
to fall into patterns of self-destruction to some degree, even if it's just apathy, right? I feel like
Hmm.
apathy is the silent killer for me
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah, dude. People need you gotta build your connections and build your Rolodex and meet more people and shake more hands because you will become a better version. I think we talked about the power of narrative for readers, writers too. Like
Hmm.
there's again going back to like counseling and psychology. There's something called projective measures. The most famous being the Rorschach. What you write that it's gonna pull from your subconscious whether you like it or not. And I never
Hmm.
know kind of the deeper stuff of what I'm writing when I'm writing it, but you look back and it's like, oh, that makes sense now. I get it. Um, for Vipers and Red Rocks, for example, before that, I was a pretty isolated guy, especially in writing. I like had my friends. I had like two friends, and I would just hang out with them. And then I changed, like that changed, and I really tried to push myself to be more social and more outgoing. And the more I met people and got into a larger community and realized kind of the flaw and the lie of being a lone wolf. Vipers kind of was a story talking all about why like that is actually a lie and how it's not the way to go. And you kind of see a lone wolf character make a huge mistake, realize, ooh, this is what happens when you're alone, and then a community has to like be the reason, and a brotherhood has to be the
Yeah.
reason that you win in the end. So I didn't realize that going into it, but exiting that, I
Hmm.
realized this was me understanding that like I can't just keep doing things on my own and thinking I'm gonna masculinize. I'm gonna be so masculine. I'm gonna get out of this. Like let me just be more manly and I'll get out of this. Like you have to meet of friends. You gotta like shake hands and open up to other people.
Hmm.
Very well said.
This is the reason why I remember reading K.M. Weiland has written some incredible books on writing. The one thing that I've always struggled with that she proposes is starting out with theme, because I don't think that theme is necessarily, depending on the story, if you start with imposing a theme in a story, you're not necessarily going to get everything out of it. Whereas
Yeah,
I'm more of the opinion theme comes about as you are writing the story.
I
And
agree
then
with
in
that.
the editing, you're polishing it up.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think I used to, I mean, for a while too, I used to think writing had to be like literary. Well, I don't know if we've
Hmm.
ever talked about this, but like I used to write very differently, and a lot of my stuff was like straight up boring, no punches, nothing. And it's like I used to think, okay, I gotta have this be meaningful. I gotta have have some literary merit, and I'm gonna force a theme, like you said, like start with that in my mind. And it's like that's a top heavy way to make your story so boring. Instead, if you just focus on entertainment and you write an
Hmm.
entertaining story that people want to read,
Hmm.
one, because of projective measures, you're gonna influence it with your own psyche. And two, if you go back, you got editing, you want a theme, you start heightening that, do that the second round. Don't go in with the intention of, I've got something to say, I don't think that's a great way to write, at least in this men's adventure fiction world. It's not a great way to do it. I've done that, trust me. Frozen Wrath, I think, is a little too preachy and like stuff like that. And I think that's where you see me as a rookie writer be like, this is a cool message. I'm gonna put this message in here. And it's like, don't do that. Stop that.
All or nothing. The gentlemen, this has been a pleasure. Where can people go learn more about you and your work? And tell me what you guys have cooking on in the background.
Want me to go
take it.
first and thing?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
You've been too much of a gentleman. It's my turn.
Um, so we're on the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify, maybe Apple, a few other places. Wherever you listen to podcasts, check it out. We're having conversations about the genre in all different facets and all different ways. So check that out. I'm on Instagram, ls_author, I believe is what it is. So that's where you can like chat with me. If you just hit me up in the DMs, we'll be able to conversate back and forth. That's where I'm most active. And then most coming up right away is Noah Redford in February has his novel,
Looking
Fire in
forward
the
to
Go,
Tall
it.
dude.
Grass. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Fire in the Tall Grass. This is a Death in the Long Grass. It's a nod to that, so I have it sitting here, but don't be confused. It's called Fire in the Tall Grass. He's going to be. It was the story I already said. He's going to get asked by a girl at a hunting camp that he's at. Can you take me to the Congo? My husband's missing there. My son needs his father back." And he's like, "Yeah, I can't say no to that." They go to the Congo. Turns out she wasn't being fully truthful with him, and there's some dark things waiting in the Congo.
Ooh,
Dude.
that's a teaser.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what a pitch. I'm sucked in. And why can't it be February already? I need this book.
Nathaniel, what about you?
Uh, yeah, Men's Adventure Fiction podcast. We got some really fun episodes coming. Like I said, or like Luke said, we've cranked out some episodes. So there's three really exciting ones coming up for you guys to check out.
Woohoo!
And one talks about style, how to incorporate that
Hmm.
into, especially in like a men's adventure fiction sense.
You guys have no idea how excited I am for this episode when my fiance, wife, then fiance, we had to do our engagement photo session. She was like,
Uh-huh.
"Ugh, what should we wear?" And I'm like, "How about khaki?
Yes,
I have a
Right.
leather
dude.
jacket
I
that'll
love
go
it.
perfect with this."
I'm thinking tan, maybe a little tan on the undershirt.
Yeah,
I
yeah, for
love
sure.
it.
Always,
So
always.
sick.
So that's really exciting because that's something that Luke and I both are super passionate about. I mean, dress for the job you want to have, right? Like,
Hmm.
you got to have that mindset. As far as stuff that I'm working on, Luke and I actually were able to release a short film on the
Ooh.
31st of December. So it's a couple weeks old at this point, and it is Nate Colt and Noah Redford's. I think it's three greats, great grandson, Thomas Redford, who is a, let's just say he's a scoundrel, dude. And so it's the two of them working together. They were hired by the CIA to take out a mercenary leader. Very fun story. We met up in November, and for 12 hours, no food, very little water. We just sat there in the middle of the woods in central Pennsylvania, punching each other, shooting each other, running around the woods with guns. And it's really fun. So you can check that out. It's on my YouTube, Nathaniel Hummel. The Adventures of
Hmm.
Wanderers is what it's called. So there's a whole backlog of web series episodes. There's like 3 seasons of it, and more stuff is coming with that. There's a teaser at the end of that episode for the continuation of season 3, which is going to follow Nate Colt, played by me, tracking down a lost ancient tome for
Hmm.
femme fatale. So very
Ooh.
fun stuff. It's really cool to have Nate Colt in two different mediums.
Hmm.
I love that. I love playing it when we get to choreograph fight scenes that take like 2, 3 hours. That is some of the most alive that I ever feel because it feels so close. You get skin in the game. I mean, Luke
Hmm.
can attest to it, dude. When you're
Yeah.
running around punching each other, throwing these punches, memorizing these lessons, you finish and you're like, dude, I'm tired. You take like one too
Yeah,
many
dude.
falls on the rock that's hidden underneath the dirt. You're like, dude, I'm not gonna be able to walk quite right for a couple days. So that's, check that out for sure. And keep your eyes posted for more Adventures of Wanderers stuff. Um, but I have the feature length Nate Colt story that I'm working on. There's something coming that's somewhat related to Fighting Hard a Man. Um, Not going to say too much yet, um, but it's very exciting. And then I have my goal for this year for sure is a 6 short story collection of Nate Colt stories, and two of
Nice.
them are going to be crime, two are going
Hmm.
to be kind of espionage themed, and two of them are going to be treasure hunting. So
Nice.
they're all written. I tried to write this character, like I said earlier. So he's a private detective who has a big background in treasure hunting because his father was really into that. So him being so good at his job in various aspects of finding people, finding treasures, he runs into his brother is actually was in the CIA. So he has enough of a reputation that the CIA hires him out for different
Hmm.
occupation or different jobs, missions, stuff like that. So I wanted, because and that comes straight from Chester Drum. He's such a
Hmm.
damn good private detective that the CIA sees him and they're like, all right, well, we can't send anybody into Germany because it's occupied, but there's a guy we need to get out. And you've got just the perfect amount of plausible deniability that we're sending you there. So I think that it makes sense. If you got a really bang up private investigator, someone's going to be paying attention to him. So hopefully that lands well. It's a really fun. I really enjoy writing those 6 stories, and they do range from I think the longest one is 18,000 words, and the shortest one's probably like 3,000, 4,000. But I plan to release that coming up here. So
That's exciting. And we will link everything that's currently available in the show notes to this episode. go subscribe to the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast, both audio and video, so you can see their lovely faces and get your copy of Fighting Heart of Man. It is well worth the read. Gentlemen, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you, man. Thank you so much for having us.